The Universal Council chamber buzzed with the usual pre-session chatter. Ambassador Krelthar of the Varinthian Empire adjusted his ceremonial breathing apparatus, settling into his suspension pod with all the dignified grace of someone who'd attended 3,000 of these meetings and found each one slightly more tedious than the last. Another human petition, muttered Silara, the Quarian representative, her scales flickering an annoyed shade of purple. Third one this cycle. What is it this time? Permission to breathe without a license? Krelthar would have laughed if his species had evolved the mechanism for it. Instead, he produced a sound somewhere between a wheeze and a grunt. The humans were persistent, he'd give them that. Annoying as a skin parasite, but persistent. Order. The council arbiter slammed 3 of his 6 appendages on the resonance platform. We will now hear petition 7743B regarding human colony request for designation ZX9. Krelthar felt his interest tick up approximately 0.03%. Colony petitions were usually straightforward. Show proof of adequate defense capabilities, demonstrate resource management protocols, pay the absolutely ridiculous fee, and boom, approved. The humans had been joining the galactic community for roughly 20 standard cycles now, and while they were odd, they generally played by the rules. What walked through the chamber doors made Krelthar question whether he'd accidentally ingested recreational substances. It was a human child, not even a fully developed specimen. This creature couldn't have been more than 10 solar rotations old, if he remembered the human life cycle correctly. She stood maybe 1.2 meters tall, with dark skin, hair twisted into some kind of decorative pattern, and wearing what appeared to be a brightly colored garment that hurt to look at for extended periods. State your designation, the arbiter said, all 6 eyes narrowing in confusion. I'm Mira Johnson, the small human said, her voice carrying across the chamber with unexpected clarity. I'm here representing New Haven Colony. Silence. Complete, utter, beautiful silence. Then Silara burst out laughing, a sound like rocks tumbling down a cliff. They sent a juvenile? To the Universal Council? Oh, this is rich. What's next? Asking us to approve crayon drawings as architectural plans. Mira tilted her head, expression unchanged. I brought blueprints, actually. They're digital. Would you like me to display them on crayon-colored backgrounds? I can adjust for your visual preferences. Krelthar's breathing apparatus made a sound suspiciously like a choke. This is absurd. Councillor Vrath boomed from his section. The Thornian warlord crossed all 4 arms. Humans, your species may be new, but surely you understand basic protocol. Send an adult. I am the colony administrator, Mira said flatly. There are no other human adults on New Haven. Just me and the wildlife. Management system. I programmed. You, a child, programmed a wildlife management system for an entire colony. Silara's scales had shifted to a shade that Krelthar roughly translated as, "Are you kidding me right now?" Well, someone had to. The automated terraforming left us with some unexpected results. Unexpected how? Krelthar found himself asking despite his better judgment. Mira pulled out a small device, projecting holographic images above the council floor. The planet looked standard enough. Temperate zones, water coverage within acceptable parameters, vegetation establishing nicely. Then the images showed the fauna. Sweet, merciful void. Someone whispered from the back rows. Krelthar leaned forward, his breathing apparatus suddenly feeling too tight. Those were Earth creatures. He recognized some from the human homeworld database, but something was wrong. Very, very wrong. Why? Vrath said slowly. Are those predators 3 times their normal size? Ah, yes. About that. Mira scratched behind her ear. So, turns out the terraforming enzymes had an unexpected interaction with Earth-based biology. Things got bigger. Also, meaner. Also, some of them developed rudimentary problem-solving skills. The image shifted to show something that Krelthar's translator database identified as a honey badger. Except this one was the size of a small transport vehicle, had teeth like industrial cutting tools, and appeared to be systematically dismantling a reinforced barrier. "That's Brutus," Mira said helpfully. "He figured out how to open airlocks last month. And you thought this qualified for colony designation?" Silara's scales had gone a shocked white. "You're asking us to approve a death world managed by a literal child? I prefer young adult administrator. But sure, if you want to get technical." Krelthar watched the council dissolve into chaos. Representatives shouting over each other, demanding explanations, calling for immediate quarantine protocols. The Arbiter slammed his appendages repeatedly, trying to restore order. Through it all, the small human stood perfectly still, waiting. Eventually, exhaustion won over outrage, and the chamber quieted. "Miss Johnson," the Arbiter said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd seen too much in his tenure. "Explain to us, very carefully, why we shouldn't immediately classify your planet as forbidden and evacuate you to proper human territory." "Because we don't need evacuation," Mira said simply. "Everything's under control." "Under control?" Vrath exploded from his seat. "Child, I have commanded armies across 17 sectors. I know what control looks like. And pictures of supersized death beasts running rampant is not it. They're not running rampant. They're managed." "By whom? Who is managing megafauna on your colony?" Mira smiled. It was not a comforting expression. "Me." The hologram shifted again. This time it showed Mira standing in what appeared to be a clearing, surrounded by creatures that should have torn her apart on sight. The massive honey badger sat beside her like an oversized, terrifying pet. A pack of wolves, each one large enough to use Krelthar as a chew toy, lounged nearby. Something his database weekly suggested might be a bear, but had grown to truly unreasonable proportions. Napped against a tree. "I've been living on New Haven for 3 standard cycles," Mira explained. "After my parents died in the initial landing accident, the automated systems continued the colony setup. I just adapted." "Adapted," Silara repeated faintly. "You adapted to being alone on a planet with supersized predators. They're not that bad once you understand them. Brutus here," she pointed to the honey badger, "mostly just wanted his territory respected and regular meals. The wolf pack needed a hierarchy structure. The bears required specific territorial boundaries. You established territorial boundaries. With bears." Krelthar wasn't sure if he was horrified or impressed. Possibly both. "Well, yeah. You can't just let them roam randomly. That's how you get chaos." Vrath leaned forward, his warrior instincts clearly engaged despite himself. "How did you avoid being killed?" "Oh, I was almost killed plenty of times. Got chased up trees. Trapped in my hab unit for days. Nearly drowned when the river crocs decided my bridge looked tasty." Mira shrugged. "But Earth predators mostly work on logic. You just have to figure out what they want and negotiate." "Negotiate?" half the council shouted in unison. "Sure. Look, Brutus wanted the Eastern Valley. I needed the water access there. So we compromised. He gets the valley. I built an aqueduct system. Everybody wins." The hologram showed said aqueduct. An impressive feat of engineering that certainly didn't look like it was designed by a child. "Where did you learn construction?" Krelthar asked. "Internet archives from Earth. Plus trial and error. Mostly error at first, but the animals were patient. Patient. The giant murder beasts were patient. I mean, they ate my failed projects, but yeah, pretty patient overall." Silara made a sound like steam escaping a damaged pipe. "This is the most insane thing I've heard in 4 centuries of council service." "To be fair," Mira said, "I haven't even gotten to the interesting part yet." "There's an interesting part?" Vrath looked like he was reconsidering his entire existence. What could possibly be more interesting than a human child surviving alone with megafauna? Mira's smile widened. "The part where they started following my commands." She pulled up another image. This one showed her standing on what looked like a crude platform, with dozens of earth creatures arrayed before her. Bears, wolves, large cats that made Krelthar's breathing hitch. birds of prey with wingspans that defied physics, and yes, several honey badgers of truly unreasonable size. It started with Brutus. I figured out that if I helped him with a thorn problem, he'd tolerate my presence. Then one day, some invasive species from the terraforming process attacked my garden. I yelled for help, and Brutus just showed up, wrecked the invasive creatures, went back to his valley. Coincidence, Silara said, but her scales flickered uncertain orange. That's what I thought. Then it happened again, and again. Eventually, I realized he was responding to specific sounds I made, so I started experimenting. The hologram showed Mira at different ages, progressively developing a series of calls, whistles, and gestures. The creatures responding, learning. Within a cycle, I had established basic communication protocols with 17 species. They defend the colony perimeter, help with construction, and keep the ecosystem balanced. You weaponized Earth fauna, Vrath breathed, and Krelthar heard something like respect in the warrior's voice. I prefer to think of it as cooperative security measures. Show us. The arbiter's voice cut through the murmuring. Demonstrate this control. Mira nodded, tapping her device. Brutus, can you hear me? The hologram shifted to real-time feed. The massive honey badger's head lifted from where he'd been doing something that looked disturbingly like patrol duty. Hey buddy, Council wants a demonstration. Can you do the routine? What happened next would haunt Krelthar's dreams for cycles to come. The honey badger stood, stretched, and proceeded to run through what could only be described as military drills, obstacle courses, precision target identification, threat assessment protocols. By the ancients, someone whispered. Now the pack, Mira said calmly. The wolves appeared, moving in coordinated patterns that would make elite military units jealous. They demonstrated flanking maneuvers, communication signals, and strategic positioning. The bears for heavy assault, the big cats for stealth operations, the birds for aerial reconnaissance. Mira narrated like she was explaining a perfectly normal defense system. We run drills twice a week, keeps everyone sharp. The council chamber had gone absolutely silent. Miss Johnson, the arbiter said very carefully, are you telling us that you, a 10-cycle-old human child, have successfully created a functional military force composed entirely of supersized Earth predators? Well, when you say it like that, it sounds weird. It is weird, Silara shrieked. Okay, fair. But it's also effective. New Haven has 0 security breaches, optimal resource management, and all inhabitants are well-fed and content. All inhabitants being you and the animal army, Krelthar said. Exactly. See, you understand. I really don't. Vrath stood, and the chamber quieted. The old warrior studied the images, his battle-scarred face thoughtful. I have fought across the galaxy, he said slowly. Commanded legions, conquered worlds. Never have I seen anything like this, he paused. It's magnificent. It's insane, Silara countered. Those are not mutually exclusive, Vrath replied. Miss Johnson, answer me honestly. If this council were threatened, could you defend us? Mira cocked her head, considering. Depends on the threat type. Ground assault? Absolutely. Aerial? Probably. Orbital bombardment? That's outside our operational parameters. She has operational parameters, Krelthar muttered. The child has operational parameters for her murder beast army. They're not murder beasts. They're wildlife management partners. They're the same thing. Not technically. Murder beasts implies malicious intent. My partners are just very good at their jobs. The arbiter slammed the platform again. Enough. Miss Johnson, your petition is highly irregular. We need time to deliberate. Sure. How much time? At least 3 standard days. Okay. Should I bring Brutus to the next session? He gets anxious if I'm gone too long. The silence that followed could have been weaponized. You want to bring the supersized honey badger to the Universal Council? Silara said in a voice that suggested she'd moved past shock into some transcendent state of disbelief. I mean, only if you want. He's really well behaved in public. No. Multiple council members shouted simultaneously. Okay, he'll stay on the ship, but he won't be happy about it. As Mira was escorted out, the council erupted into the most heated debate Krelthar had witnessed in centuries. Some called for immediate rejection. Others advocated for quarantine. A few, led by Vrath, argued that the humans had demonstrated exactly the kind of adaptability and resourcefulness the galaxy needed. Krelthar sat in his suspension pod, re-watching the footage of the small, human child commanding creatures that could tear battle tanks apart. Humans had been in the galactic community for 20 cycles. In that time, they'd been dismissed as weak, fragile, unsuited for anything beyond supervised colonies. This one child had just turned every assumption on its head. His breathing apparatus wheezed what might have been a laugh. The next 3 days were going to be very interesting. The 3-day deliberation period turned into the most chaotic 72 hours in Universal Council history. Krelthar watched species who hadn't agreed on anything in decades suddenly form passionate alliances over the human-child question. The Varinthian military consulted xenobiology experts. The Quarian diplomatic corps pulled every historical record on Earth fauna. Somewhere on level 6, a fistfight broke out between two researchers arguing about honey badger psychology. Meanwhile, Mira Johnson had been given guest quarters in the station's diplomatic wing, where she promptly caused 3 separate incidents. First, she hacked the food dispensers to produce something called pizza, which violated at least 4 health codes and smelled like biological warfare. Second, she reprogrammed the cleaning drones to play what she called fetch, resulting in a station-wide chase scene that traumatized the night maintenance crew. Third, and most disturbingly, she'd apparently made friends with the station's head of security, a grizzled Carthon veteran named Rax, who hadn't smiled since the sector wars. She taught me poker, Rax explained when questioned, his mandibles clicking in what Krelthar had learned was amusement. Kid's got a better tactical mind than half my academy graduates. She's 10 cycles old. Yeah. And she survived 3 years alone on a death world, commanding an army of apex predators. You want me to not be impressed? Krelthar didn't have a good answer for that. On the morning of the council reconvening, he arrived early to find Silara already in her seat, scales flickering through colors so rapidly it was almost hypnotic. Can't sleep? He asked. Every time I close my eyes, I see that honey badger doing military drills, she admitted. What has my life become? Welcome to my nightmare. The chamber filled slowly. Representatives took their positions with an unusual tension crackling through the air. Everyone knew this vote would set a precedent. Approve Mira's colony. And they'd be acknowledging that humans could thrive in conditions that would destroy most other species. Reject it. And they'd be admitting they were afraid of a single child. Neither option felt comfortable. Mira entered wearing a different brightly colored outfit, this one featuring small earth animals that Krelthar's database identified as cats. She carried a datapad and what appeared to be a drink container covered in cartoon characters. Morning, everyone, she called cheerfully. Who's ready to make history? Your confidence is either admirable or concerning, Vrath rumbled. We haven't decided yet. Oh, I know. But you will. Such certainty, the arbiter said, settling into position. Miss Johnson, before we vote. Several have not. Council members have questions. Shoot. Councillor Thex of the Binding Collective raised one of her many tendrils. Your psychological evaluations show no trauma markers despite losing your parents and surviving alone. How? Mira's expression softened slightly. I miss them every day. But they taught me that survival isn't about avoiding pain. It's about deciding what you do with it. She shrugged. I chose to build something they'd be proud of. Silence greeted this. Uncomfortable, respectful silence. Next question, the arbiter said quietly. Silara leaned forward. What happens when you reach maturity? Will these creatures still obey you? Good question. I've been preparing successors, actually. Teaching younger animals the command structures while maintaining the existing hierarchy. By the time I'm old enough for formal colony administration, we'll have a 3-generation training protocol in place. You've planned decades ahead. Krelthar said. At age 10, well yeah, you can't just wing colony management. That's how disasters happen. From anyone else, it would have sounded arrogant. From this child who'd literally tamed supersized predators, it just sounded like common sense. I have a question. Vrath stood, his massive frame dominating his section. You've demonstrated defensive capabilities, but what about offense? If another species attempted invasion, could your forces mount an assault? Mira's face went serious. They could, but that's not what we're building. New Haven is about coexistence, not conquest. The animals defend because it's their home too. I'd never order an unprovoked attack, but you could. Lots of people could do lots of things. Doesn't mean they should. She met Vrath's gaze steadily. My parents died because someone made a mistake with equipment safety protocols. One careless choice, and everything changed. I learned that power without responsibility is just destruction waiting to happen. The old warrior studied her for a chair. Long moment, then slowly nodded and sat down. Any other questions? The arbiter asked. Yes. The voice came from the back rows, from a section rarely occupied. A whisper monk, one of the galaxy's most reclusive species, had apparently decided to attend. Child of Earth, what do you fear? Mira blinked. That's a weird question. Nevertheless, she was quiet for a moment, actually thinking. I guess I'm scared of losing them. The animals. They're not pets. They're partners. Family, sort of. If something happened because I made a bad call. She trailed off. That keeps me up at night. Good. The whisper monk said. Fear teaches caution. You will need both. Then the figure faded back into shadows, apparently done with the conversation. Okay. That was creepy, Mira muttered. Despite the tension, several representatives made sounds approximating laughter. If there are no further questions, the arbiter said, we shall vote. All in favor of approving colony designation for New 2 Haven? Vrath's hand went up immediately. Several military-aligned species followed. Then, surprisingly, some of the scientific coalition raised appendages. The agricultural representatives. Even a few of the typically conservative factions. All opposed? Silara's hand started to rise, then hesitated. Her scales flickered through a dozen colors before settling on resigned blue. Her hand lowered. The opposition was smaller than Krelthar expected. Still substantial, but not the overwhelming rejection many had predicted. Abstentions. Krelthar raised his appendage, along with perhaps a quarter of the council. Not ready to approve, but unwilling to deny. The arbiter tallied results, his 6 eyes scanning multiple displays. The chamber held its breath. By a vote of 47 to 32, with 21 abstentions, New Haven Colony is hereby granted provisional designation status. Cheers and groans erupted simultaneously. Mira simply smiled. Provisional? She asked over the noise. You will undergo quarterly inspections, the arbiter explained. Submit detailed reports on fauna management. Allow council observers on planet. Any incident will result in immediate review. That's fair. When's the first inspection? 2 weeks. Perfect. That gives me time to finish the visitor center. You're building a visitor center, Krelthar said flatly. Well, yeah. You're gonna send inspectors. They'll need somewhere to stay. Can't have them camping in wolf territory. Brutus would never forgive me. She's worried about the honey badger's feelings, Silara muttered. We've approved a colony run by someone worried about a murder beast's feelings. He's very sensitive, Mira said seriously. You'd understand if you met him. I will literally never understand that, and I'm okay with it. The arbiter slammed for order. Miss Johnson, you understand the conditions? Yep. Quarterly inspections, detailed reports, observers welcome. Anything else? Yes. One personal question, if I may. The arbiter leaned forward, his ancient eyes studying the small human. Why petition at all? You could have simply remained on New Haven, unknown and unregulated. Why risk rejection? Mira's expression turned thoughtful. Because hiding isn't the same as living. My parents came to space believing humans belonged among the stars. Not above anyone, not below anyone. Just here, part of the community. She gestured around the chamber. This is that dream. Messy, complicated, sometimes ridiculous, but real. Even knowing many species see humans as weak, Vrath asked. Especially then. See, I learned something from the animals. Strength isn't about size or teeth or claws. It's about adaptation, cooperation, finding your place in the ecosystem and defending it. She grinned. And if that ecosystem happens to include a honey badger the size of a shuttle, well, bonus points for style. Laughter rippled through the chamber. Genuine this time. You're going to be trouble, Krelthar said. But he was making the wheezing sound that passed for Varinthian amusement. Probably. But fun trouble. There's no such thing as fun trouble. Then you're not doing it right. As the council adjourned, species who'd argued against approval approached Mira with grudging respect. Those who'd supported her offered resources and advice. Even Silara stopped by, her scales a cautiously optimistic green. Don't make me regret abstaining, the Quarian said. I'll do my best. Want to meet Brutus sometime? He's actually really sweet, once you get past the terrifying exterior. Absolutely not. Your loss. Krelthar watched the small human work the room like a seasoned diplomat, simultaneously childlike and impossibly mature. He approached as the crowd thinned. Miss Johnson, may I ask you something off the record? Sure. Do you ever get scared? Truly scared, not just worried about making mistakes. Mira looked up at him, and for a moment, Krelthar saw past the confidence and competence to the lonely child underneath. Every single day. But being scared and moving forward anyway? That's kind of the human thing, I guess. Your species is very strange. Thanks. We try. 3 months later, Krelthar arrived on New Haven as part of the first official inspection team. He stepped off the shuttle to find Mira waiting beside a creature that made his breathing apparatus malfunction. Brutus, the honey badger, looked even more terrifying in person. Massive, scarred, with teeth that could probably chew through hull plating. The beast watched the inspection team with intelligent, calculating eyes. Brutus, this is Ambassador Krelthar, Mira said calmly. He's here to check on us. Be nice. The honey badger made a sound like grinding rocks. Then, incredibly, impossibly, dipped his enormous head in what might have been a nod. He says, "Welcome to New Haven," Mira translated. You speak honey badger now? Sort of. It's more like reading body language and attitude. Come on. I'll show you around. The tour was simultaneously impressive and absolutely insane. Mira had transformed the colony into a functioning ecosystem where humans and supersized earth fauna coexisted. Agricultural zones protected by wolf patrols. Water systems monitored by the river creatures. Even the birds had jobs, carrying communication devices between distant stations. This shouldn't work, Krelthar said, watching a bear the size of a building carefully avoid stepping on irrigation equipment. Probably not. But it does. That evening, Krelthar filed his report. He detailed the infrastructure, the safety protocols, the remarkable integration of fauna into colony operations. He noted 0 incidents, optimal resource management, and the most unusual defense force in galactic history. His final line read simply, "Recommend full colony status. Humanity has proven itself in ways we never anticipated." 6 months after that, New Haven received full designation. Mira Johnson, age 11 standard cycles, became the youngest recognized colony administrator in Universal Council history. She celebrated by teaching Brutus a new trick involving an obstacle course and what she called motivational roaring. The honey badger seemed to enjoy it immensely. Years would pass. Mira would grow. New Haven would expand. Other humans would arrive, drawn by stories of the impossible colony. The supersized fauna would become legendary, and several military academies would develop courses based on Mira's command protocols. But that first approval, that moment when a child made the galaxy reconsider everything it thought it knew about humanity, that was the day the Universal Council learned what every Earth predator already knew. Never underestimate a human who's decided to survive. especially if they've made friends with a honey badger.